now we will be moving on with the panel discussion that we have from Women Leader in Technology. And then that will be followed by a small break, a short break. And then we'll move on with Craig's speech and Caroline's speech. So for now, I'd like to request Women Leaders in Technology for our second panel discussion for the day. So the topic is women innovators using tech and data for problem solving. So I'd like to hand over to Nirisha ji from WLiT.
Sure, thank you. Am I audible? Is it clear?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Sure, thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much for joining in for the Women in Data Virtual Conference 2021. So I suppose this will be the last panel discussion for today, followed by some other speaker notes. So before going on to the panel discussion, I am Nirisha Manandar from Women Leaders in Technology, your panel moderator for today. And as Varshaji has already mentioned, our panel discussion will be on women innovators who are using data and tech for problem solving. So basically, this panel discussion will revolve around stories of success, of challenges, and also of opinions of our panelists who've worked with data in their respective fields. So to start off, I'd like to, first of all, welcome our three precious panelists. First and foremost, we have Ms. Bonny Pradhan, our first panelist today, a data enthusiast, a digital innovator, and a business intelligence consultant. She's currently working on cutting-edge data analytics and BI technologies in LIS Nepal. As an ADB GSP scholar, she completed her master's in engineering degree in information management from AIT Thailand, and her research was focused on creating an app for safe travel for women in Nepal. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Bonny Pradhan. Our next panelist, Mrs. Rumi Singh, has over 15 years of experience in leading production teams. One of the co-founders at Rumsan Groups, she has launched and led several initiatives such as Hamro Life Bank, Katha for Nepal, and Rahat. In 2019, she started Hamro Life Bank to fill the data gap in blood management and has been providing blood-related information and trying to digitize blood banks in Nepal. So I'd like to welcome Mrs. Rumee Singh as well. And last but not the least, we have Ms. Princi Koirala. With 8 years of experience in product, design, and technology entrepreneurship, Ms. Princi Koirala is one of the co-founders at Moonlit Solutions, where she has delivered projects in data-driven decision-making. She's also a passionate teacher and has currently been delivering classes and workshops on social media and digital citizenship at Kathmandu University School of Arts. So I'd like to welcome all our three panelists. So before moving on towards the more core questions, I'd really like to start off with something really light and also something that I would want to know. So looking at your experience, your data journey, and how far you've come, I'd really want to know how you actually started out in this field. And also in this course of time that you've had in this journey, what meaning has data had for you? Or like, how has the meaning changed so far? So I'd really like to go first with Mrs. Rumi.
Hi, Nirisha. Thank you. So for my journey, I'd just say that I started as an engineering student from IOE Pulchar campus, and I did my engineering in electronics engineering and electronics. And then I went to the US, and I was in the US for 13 years and in Dubai for a year before I moved back to Nepal a couple of years ago. I actually had switched my career from technology to communication when I was in the US, but I was always connected to technology to some extent. Like my latest stint before moving back to Nepal was I worked on creating an internal comms application for PepsiCo for their 270,000 employees. So that was a big product rollout that I worked on as part of the communication as well as a tech background. After moving back to Nepal, I've lead Rumsan Group, and as part of Rumsan, as you mentioned, I lead several initiatives. Hamro Life Bank is very near and dear to me. I started this a couple of years ago with the whole idea of cutting out the stress of finding and arranging blood for patients' families. And basically, we look at digital transformation of blood banks, which means that, we are digitizing the life cycle of a blood bank. So we call it the vein-to-vein initiative. So we're digitizing every point. So we're collecting data from donor's vein up to the patient's vein. So it is a work in progress. We're taking small baby steps, and we've run like a number of smart donation events where we create a very immersive digital experience for donors. And the whole idea behind it is, we've spent in the consumer world, there's so much focus on consumer satisfaction and consumer retention. So when we're looking at something as a social cause as blood donation, like why aren't we focusing on blood donors to retain them and give them a good experience so they could come back and feel good about something they've done? I also lead Rahat, which is a blockchain-based aid distribution platform. And in this aspect as well, like data is of utmost importance because we do track the flow of transactions and maintain end-to-end transparency among various stakeholders for aid agencies. So for any kind of cash distribution, we're making sure that we're collecting all the data in between, and aid agencies have access to that. So for me, like starting from an engineering degree to moving on to comms and then coming back to technology, it's kind of sort of been like a full circle where I've realized that, when we're talking of data, it's something that I feel like is the core foundation, and it really helps create really optimize business processes and really helps people understand and help them make informed decisions. So I strongly feel that this is a field that we should try to push and I guess help people understand it more.
Thank you so much, Rumee. I'd also like to ask this question to Ms. Bonny. So how did you start out, and what role has data actually played in your area of work?
Thank you, Nirisha. I would also like to thank the UK Aid, the Asia Foundation, Data for Development, and all the other communities like Women Leaders in Technology for having me here. I am delighted and feel grateful and blessed to be here today, expressing my thoughts. When I talk about the beginning of my journey in this field, it's not very dramatic. It wasn't planned at all. I aspired to be a doctor since my childhood, but since that did not work out, I took the next career that is sought after in Nepalese family, engineering. So that's how I became an IT engineer. I did my undergrad in India and was determined to come back home. One, because I saw the scope and potential of IT in Nepal at that time, and two, also because I dearly missed home. So when I joined my company, the IT company Alliance Nepal, I actually started working on programming for web application development. When the company structure changed after a year or so, I was asked to move into the data department temporarily, but I found my true calling in data analytics and never looked back. I started working on development and testing and went on to consulting for an international client in Indonesia, which was a national level retailer. And there I could see how data driven decisions were taken to run the entire business at different levels. I would like to quote the example of something we can all relate to, Bhat Bhatini, the retailer in Nepal. So if I had to talk about how data decisions would be driven in retailer, it is done at various levels. For a very operational level, it could be data on what everyone is buying, which creating bills for customers, what is in their basket, and all of that. So maybe it could be like, do we have enough number of YYs in stock for the day according to the sales of YY that happened the previous day? On a more managerial level, it could be something like where should YY be placed on the shelf? Should there be another noodle packet next to it? If yes, which one? And then on a strategic planning level, it could be something like, if we want to open another store, where should the location be? So this whole idea of data driven decision making was very interesting for me. But I always felt that if the corporate field can benefit so much from it, what would the impact be in a development field? So when I joined my master's degree, I aspired to do some analytics for a social cause, and that's why I took the area of creating a safe ride hailing experience for women and worked on survey and expert interviews for this project. So that is how I'm here today.
Thank you so much for your experience sharing. And lastly, I'd also like to ask the same question to Princi about how she started and how, if the journey has been any different. Hello?
Okay, thank you, Nirisha. Am I audible? Yeah, so, okay. So first of all, yeah, it's wonderful to be here. So the journey for me began to work in data-driven decision-making started from when I was working for the first ride-sharing platform in Nepal called Toodle. So there, my team and me, we were actively spending a lot of time and effort in actually gathering and analyzing data and researching how better we can use it and optimize our business processes, operations, marketing, everything. And so at that time, we were actually able to utilize the real-time data and then create data visualization, which eventually improved our ride performance, the number of rides we're doing. We were able to reduce the waiting times for our clients and a lot of other things. We were able to study the behavioral trends of the consumers and then target personalized marketing campaigns. I'm sorry, is there a problem? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's how it began. And after Total, when we start Moonlit, we wanted to focus more on BI and data solutions to cross-industry client base. And through Moonlit, we have had an opportunity to study business processes of clients in different domains like education, healthcare, and entertainment sectors. And we are now actively researching how better we can leverage data and bring efficiencies to different business processes of different clients in different domains. Yeah, that's how the journey began.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think there are a lot of common, I must say, milestones that we all have been through. But again, as we move on to like different fields and all of these different sectors, I think that's where we diverse out. So now, going to the main questions, I'd like to start with something I think that we should address before moving on to even the greater details. So as we know, while we're talking about data, and when we see data, data is usually seen as something that we use to identify existing problems, you know. So we have a lot of data, we identify these problems. But now that we talk to you and you talk about data-driven solutions, so how do you think is the process of, you know, taking data from something just to identify problems to actually solve these problems? So how do you think data-driven solutions come in the limelight? I'd like to start with Ms. Rumi for this.
So for data-driven pieces, like I just get an example of Hammer Life Bank as well with this, like, and as Bonny was talking about, you know, when she was talking about how, like, you know, you would look at like YY, and for any customer like Bhat Patini, you'd say like how many YY packages should be there every day, and how many, you know, like should be placed in a certain section, and how that would help. Like for us as well, like when we look at blood bank, like, and especially when you're looking from a customer to like the healthcare sector, right? So I'm specifically talking about blood banking as well. Like in Nepal, right now, everything is paper-based, like at least in the blood banking sector that I'm talking about. And when we're talking about let's make some data-driven decisions, like we're starting out, like really talking about the, really talking about the infant stage where we don't even have data to analyze, right? Because everything is in dodda or registers, as we call that in Nepali, right? So when I did my research, when I got back to Nepal and spent a year visiting all of these different blood banks and hospitals and really understanding how data is kept there to see like, okay, can we look at data-driven solutions? Like, can we look at data to see what kind of solution can there be, what kind of problems there could be? There's basically no data. So, here I am like also talking about blockchain, and we have to get to that end-to-end transparency, but I mean, we're nowhere close to that because we don't even have access to data. So even as something as simple as when we compare to like YY, the stock of YY in Bhat Patini, to the stock of blood in blood bank, you know, we don't have anything that we could relate to. Like in the US, when I did a blood bank visit in Colorado, they had this data, they analyze their stocks every day. And so they would say that, you know, we have O positive blood for 6 days. donors, come on, we need you to back us up here. We won't have blood after 6 days. You guys need to come and donate. And that's how they are really asking donors to come and help out. And here we don't have any of that facility because we're not collecting data in a manner it should be collected. So that's been for me, like when you're looking at data-driven solutions and figuring out what the challenges are, when we aren't even like starting to we're not even collecting data. I think the problems, it starts from there, at least from the field that I'm working in. And that's part of what I'm really pushing to see if we can at least start managing data at a very preliminary stage. We could really look at assessing them and analyzing them and creating trends and seeing, okay, we have stocks until like 6 days, or we could look at like, okay, there are certain areas or certain timings of the year when we see that Nepal sees a dip in blood donations. How do we plan that out? So that definitely is the vision when we look at data-driven solutions, but I think the starting part is really something that we have to get going on. So that's where I'd end.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your insights. I think the way how you connected, like when we talk about like health related data and its solutions, it becomes quite crucial. The decisions become quite crucial. And as you said, there is a lot of gap in like the data itself. So now that we have like a brief understanding of like the health related data, as you talked about, and how there are gaps in data itself, I'd also really like to connect this to a different aspect. Like, for example, how would you consider, like, Ms. Bonny, I would like to ask this question to you. How do you think that you see the data that you have could be used for like solutions like in business, or as you said?
All right. So to take that question and add on to what Rumidi said, if it's a blood, if we are talking about a blood bank, like she said, the vision should really be how we can actually plan blood donation campaigns from the data that we have. So obviously, the very first step is to collect data and make it accessible for day-to-day operations. Automation and digitization, I'm sure, can help address the urgency there is in a, in a field like medical field for blood donation. There might be situations where a patient urgently requires O negative, O positive blood or so, and having manual systems or having these records in registers could cost us a life. So the first thing is obviously the operational systems as we go there. But besides that, as we talk about data collection, I think having a single version of truth and maintaining a repository is really necessary. Although we may have different blood banks across the country and we may have donors even in different hospitals, there should be a central repository, possibly governed by the government of Nepal, so that there is some authority, or contracted to someone else with that authority being given. And once we have a central repository, we can really trust numbers after that. And then we can rely on our data to tell a story about, okay, this is the blood campaign that we are looking for, maybe at this time of the year, as Rumidi just said. And maybe this is the risk zone, age group risk zone for us in our country, types of surgeries where blood is definitely required. Can we have backup for these situations? So I think it all starts from there, where we can trust the numbers, first of all.
Thank you so much. And relating to this question, I think a very interesting topic that came up is like, as Rumi ji already said, there is a lot of gap in data itself. So I'd really like to ask this question to Princi ji. If there's anything that, have you come across any such solution that did have, you see, the data gap had an impact on your solution, or the solution itself was not doable because of the data gap? Have you faced any such cases, Ms. Princi?
In the topic of data gap, what I would like to add is to many organizations that we've approached doing work together, we've had sometimes feedbacks like, we don't have enough data for you to do analysis. I mean, while you develop business, we get that kind of responses. I mean, so what are you trying to analyze on? But I think a part of a barrier that we need to break is right there. I mean, identifying what kind of data points an organization needs to have, what kind of KPIs any organization or business needs to have. We need to start there. And that is the first step to start eliminating data gaps. That's where I begin with them. I mean, so this is also a part of service that we actually try to give while we approach businesses or organizations to work is the first part is actually identifying the data points and the KPIs of your organization business. And that's where we start. And as we proceed with that, and analysis comes as a third step, maybe. So that's how we've approached the problem. So yeah, I think a part of a problem having data gap in Nepal is, so this is something that I personally feel, is we rely too much in heuristic reasoning. So there's very less reliance on deductive reasoning. I mean, I think heuristic reasoning is something very important. I personally believe a lot in it, but not at the cost of not having a deductive reasoning, not as a compensation of not being able to quantify something, and or being that laid back in quantifying the things you need to quantify and relying. I do not believe that. I think it has to be a correct balance between heuristic and deductive. And in our culture, I think we rely more on heuristics than deductive reasoning. So, which is why people don't feel the need to even identify the data points in their organization. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I think now that we've talked about, like, the technical difficulties and challenges that come along with data, I'd also like to come back a bit about what difficulties that you have to face as an individual, because we see we have all our three panelists from like quite diverse fields of data and their work as well, their work experience as well. So I'd really like to know if there were any misconceptions that you had to deal with, or any challenges that you had to deal with, and also how did you actually tackle these challenges? I'd like to start again with Mrs. Rumi for this one.
I feel like the biggest challenge when it comes to data is, I think it's ignorance to some extent, because a lot of people don't understand the value of data. And as Princi just said, like, we don't have enough data. What are you analyzing for? And, is there a need to really collect data? It's like they're not understanding what data-informed decision is, how that could really optimize their processes. And, for something in health, and we're not even talking about, like, for me, it's like, we're so focused on blood as well. Like, there's a lot of concern about, okay, what are we going to be doing with the data? Like, what is the privacy with it? Like, what does it mean by digitizing something, right? So, I mean, we can start, it's almost like when I say ignorance, like, we have websites, we can do websites, so really not understanding what data is, or like, not even going far to data analysis, is to say, like, and really thinking that, okay, like, oh, she's coming here, she's going to take all of her data, maybe she's going to start her own blood bank, and connect with all the donors. And so there's a fear that really comes out of, I'm saying the word ignorance a lot. I feel like, if people are more open to to really listening to see, hey, these are the 5 things, as simple as that. And I think I feel like if there's any way to show in like smaller steps, like the instant gratification, in lack of better words, to say, like, here, this is how data can really help you make this decision, is something that, I'm really striving for. And I feel like instead of like where I started, like, okay, this is the big plan, and this is what's going to happen with all of the data decisions, and this is what we're going to analyze. Like, I've really understood that. I think the last 2 years, that's really not going to work. Like, I really have to like distill it down to like something very small that they can digest and people can see and feel, right? So we just started as something simple as like, okay, in a blood bank in Bhaktapur here, to say like, okay, let's just start digitizing daily stock, right? So, and let's just put it up on a screen so you see how much the input and the throughput of the blood is every day. So when you're seeing that, I think people can really start to like finding that trust or trust to like keep on continuing it. So I think it's definitely a long process, but you know, you have to start somewhere and keep on pushing it.
Thank you so much. Relating to this, I'd also like to ask this to Bonnie, also because you've started out quite some time early, and then how do you think that the environment that you had access to when you started out, and like now that you see the this field today, so how do you think that what are the differences that you spot back when you started out and like what's going on right now, and also in terms of like maybe women involvement in this field? So how do you think it has changed, or is there something lacking still?
All right. So when I started out, I would like to point out that I was the only female new hire out of 11 fresh graduates in my company. And this was completely in contrast to where I'd studied in South India, where there were 50% male and female students. And same for the number of professors that we had. So I was thrown into this stark contrast, but now I see that the participation of female or any gender is much higher in the field of IT, and that's a really good sign. But what I see missing back then and also now is the participation in leadership roles or managerial level roles. I had no one to look up to who was a woman and also leading in my field at that time. And I think if this scenario changes, we can um, leap forward in terms of the economic sector a lot for the growth of of the country as a whole. I'm saying this because I've seen it in my academic and professional careers in other countries in the Asian Pacific region, where women are very involved in the managerial roles, and it makes a difference because then it means almost whole of your population are involved. And the next thing I'd like to point out is any solutions, IT solutions or data solutions we create and develop is also always has a business or a social goal to it, or a problem that we are actually trying to solve. And in this matter, just having IT knowledge is not enough. You have to really coordinate with the business users and make an effort to identify the problem first before we can actually propose a solution. Sometimes you have to keep your technical brain behind while you have the discussions. This is something I learned myself the hard way. When I was looking at a report or a dashboard, I was seeing something completely different. The technical side, where did this data come from? How are we representing this chart? Whereas the business was seeing a different story. It was seeing why was sales low yesterday, which store had less sales. Was it the weather? Was it something else? Was it less stock in that store? So for that coordination, I think all genders, binary or non-binary gender, need to come together and work on this to really make it happen. So in terms of challenges, I think that's what compares and contrasts to then and now for me.
Thank you so much. I'd also like to ask this to Princi, because like as your experiences could match with Miss Bonny as well. So how do you think that right now, as you see it, with the women participation as well, so how do you think that, what are the possible causes that maybe women participation in low, especially in the field of data and tech, or have you faced any such experiences?
Yes, so I think I also come from an engineering school. So I've had to deal a lot of gender-based conscious, unconscious biases during my engineering school. But at workplace, that wasn't at the scale that I had to face during my engineering school. So I think that things are changing for the good also, but the dialogue has to be constantly maintained. And I think as women, we need to speak about it more, because myself, during my engineering days, I feel I was quite naive. I wasn't aware about these kind of biases. So at one point, it really made my self-esteem really low. But I feel that if I was aware about these kind of biases that happens in tech and data for women, then I could have navigated it better. So which is why I think this is a constant battle as women. We have to slowly eliminate it, that the challenges for women in pursuing tech and data is always there. But talking about a challenge for women working particularly in data now goes to addressing the data gaps that can happen. I think that is more important when we talk about women working in data. So a little while ago, I was reading a book called Invisible Women, and it talks about data biases in a world designed for men. And it speaks about how when we define human evolution, it is labeled as the man hunter and the man hunting. And so the book questions, so what were the women doing then? So data gap is a very old age story. It happened way back and we're just addressing it now, and it is more threatening now because now these biases can actually be transferred to trained systems like neural networks. But these algorithms can only be as smart as the trained data sets we can feed them. And so if we can address these gaps, the gender data gaps, or any other data gaps, inclusion for that matter. So I think the challenge for women is to address data gaps now, talking from a data perspective. So we need more women in this field more than ever now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for connecting. Also, we do talk a lot about women representation, and also a bit of it also links to like the data that is actually generated when women are represented, women lead teams. So I think that is also a crucial part when it comes to like building solutions for everyone, most probably. So again, relating back to this, IT itself is quite a vast field. There are a lot of aspects, there are a lot of areas one can get engaged in. So I'd like to pass this question to Mrs. Rumee, because as someone who has had the taste of almost like different fields relating to IT and also coming back and building solutions with the help of IT. So what do you think is one crucial point in the data field that is different from these other fields that you've been engaged in?
I think, with data, everything lies in details, I would feel, right? So, technology, I feel, is the foundation of pretty much everything. So, from engineering to journalism to corporate communication to back to what I do with strategic communication and handling several initiatives at Rumsan Group, like technology is just like, now it's just part of everything. Data, I think, is something that needs more attention and again, really understanding, as I had said earlier, that, okay, data does not mean that, you have a website, just filling up forms. There's more thought to it, right? There's more analysis to it. That's why we've talked about really mining through tons of data. We're talking about big data and seeing how that can really help inform authorities to make decisions. So it's definitely something that is I think, is a niche and needs a lot more work and has a lot of opportunities. And I think as Princi had said, I think from really looking at the having more women get more involved, creating that diverse workforce is very, very important for something like this. So I think that's really makes it a little bit of a bucket that requires more thought and strategic planning and making people understand, as Bonny had said, what is the business side of it? We're looking at technically, we're saying we're going to just must start mining data, like feed us data, but how is business looking at it? How is someone at health looking at it? How is an aid agency looking at it to see? So I think that makes a big difference.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Now that you've talked about big data, I'd also like to pass this question on to Bonny. So as someone who's worked with big data and data warehousing technologies, so we look at data as something that could be a solution to all of our problems. And again, with big data, it simply means we have large volumes of data, which could be potential solutions to our problems. But then have you had any such experience where big data as a whole was not really the solution, or maybe something that you thought was a massive failure?
All right. So just adding on to what you just said, uh, when we look at data, there is a misconception at many points that if you have the data digitized and if you have the processes automated, that's it, you can draw decisions from it. But then, as we have been seeing in this conference throughout, there is a difference between data, information, and knowledge. These are completely different things. Data is just plain data that we feed into the system. To reiterate for everyone here, information has to be contextual. So if I say the number of COVID cases by location or by gender, then this could be information. Uh, so maybe we have more females infected at some point of time than males. And then this requires critical analysis, which leads us to knowledge. And knowledge can only be derived with expertise and experience, in my opinion. And as you said, if data would not be enough, I think it would be the case where we cannot apply the expertise or the experience that domain experts already have in that field. And if I would say only the technical team is trying to draw conclusions from a set of data, like if I had the blood donation data without Rumi's inputs, then I don't think I could be able to draw meaningful conclusions from it, because I could just make a blunder in that case. So I think domain expertise goes hand in hand with the technological and technical team to create an impactful solution. One example that comes to my mind with this is when I was doing my research on women and their safety in Kathmandu while traveling, I had a question: do you want a female driver? And my expectation was everybody will say yes to this question. But the data said something else. And when I digged down further, it was that women felt safe with women drivers only at daytime. At night time, they were of the opinion that what if both of us are women, then there is no one who looks, I would like to use the word looks, who, who looks like he can protect us in some situation. So you are supposed to be more vulnerable in that case. So I think the context and the background is really important apart from the data you have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your insights. These examples that you're talking about, it's much more relevant to, like, these scenarios that we also see. So now that we're talking about, big data and large volumes of data and what data could and could not do, I think a very big question that is quite out there today is about data privacy concerns. When a lot of data is being generated, there also are concerns about how will this data be used. Will it be used for a good purpose or a bad purpose? Or like, how is it acquired? Is it safe that I give my data for any kind of problem solving? So how do you think, or like, for example, how do you manage or incorporate these privacy factors in the work that you do? I'd like to ask this first to Ms. Princi.
Okay, speaking technically, so there are so many things we can do to like establish a trusted, secure channel for data exchange. So also a few other data techniques like data anonymization, pseudonymization, a lot of those things. But I think speaking it from ethical sense, I feel like when speaking about all kinds of computing fields, this is why there is a requirement of a proper blend of a social science aspect and perspective to it. Subjects like anthropology, sociology, digital humanities, all of this needs to be blended with the computing and technical courses that are being offered today in an academic sense. Also, we have a lot of instances how technology, social media, AI, all of these are being used for unethical purposes. And so privacy is also around that part. So privacy of the data for being used it in an unethical manner. So I think, I advocate for a need of blend of those kind of subjects for people to just be able to distinguish what is ethical and what is unethical, and to create a future for the responsible technology, responsible AI. So I think, yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd also like to ask this to Rumidi, because like as someone who's working with health data, I'm assuming that there are a lot of privacy concerns that come into play when you're accessing this data, when you're using it for problem solutions. So how do you manage like your privacy or like any privacy concerns that come up with your end customers?
I'm laughing out here because I mean, again, like I'm very specific to blood, so I'm not touching all of health. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen like hundreds and thousands of names in websites where they've like signed up donors. So there's like no, I think the concept of privacy is very low. People are so much into like, oh, this is for donations, like, you know, this is a social cause, you know, I want to share my phone number, I'm going to put it out there. So there's been lots of cases where, you know, people are just, as Bonnie said, you're just collecting data, right? So there's, we're not talking about, not looking at data information or anything of that sort, but people are just putting them, digitizing them and putting it up on websites, and we could just go and pull up the name and call them. There have also been cases where, you know, I had someone who worked in the office who shared his story where, you know, his grandfather was in need of a certain type of blood, and, you know, he got like over 200 calls because he put out a message in social media that said, you know, I need blood, which all of you may have seen just flooding in Facebook and other social media channels. And he started to get like so many calls, right? So from 200 plus calls. So he spent hours just managing that and saying, I don't need that blood anymore. So it's kind of, rather than the privacy concern, like it turned into a nuisance concern as well. So it turned into a privacy issue where it's like, okay, I don't want my numbers there, or having like people just call up donors randomly and saying like, can you come and donate? And to be honest, like in a lot of cases, I feel like people, if you call a blood donor and say, would you donate blood? 99% of them would probably say yes, instead of asking, where did you find my number? But we also, because my team runs a blood hotline, 24/7 blood hotline, which we started with during the lockdown, that kind of helped with plasma therapy calls as well. And we've been trying to get consent of all of these donors to say, you know, if we're keeping it again to very primitive level, right? We're talking about data encryption, and that's there, and all of those are there. But when it comes to the ethical pieces, as Princi mentioned as well, like, you know, something as primitive as getting consent from the donors so that, you know, we have their data. So when we're calling them, we're knowing that, you know, you are okay for us to use your data. We're not going to be selling it to a third-party sales agent, and you'll start getting texts from Big Mart, which I now get like every day about like, you know, there's a cauliflower coming for 10 rupees or something. But anyway, so I think just boiling it down to something that's very primitive as to consent to start with when it comes to privacy is what I'm starting with.
Thank you so much. I'd also like to pass this on to Miss Bonny, because again, with a different area of interest and with the different work that you do, are there also any such privacy concerns that you've had to like face, or how do you deal with it in your area of work?
So I would like to add on to what my co-panelist just said, and I think to address this question, I would like to take the examples of more national level systems where the privacy of data is more critical. And I think the problem, first of all, arises where people are concerned about the misuse of their personal data, and also with the lack of policies that we actually have in place for people to feel secure. In 2020, with contact tracing going on, I think that could be a primary example of privacy concerns for everyone. People were very concerned that the data would be misused, and there were a lot of countries who brought out policies on data and put it up online so that their citizens could trust the government with what was being done with the amount of data that was being collected. So even in the context of our country, I think it should really start at the policy level. The ethical topic that we are touching, that Princi just said, I think it should be backed also with the regulations. Regulations should be drafted with the proper stakeholders so that we don't miss out on anything. The data protection laws should be available, easily accessible to everyone, so that people are aware of what they are committing to and what they are liable for. So I think the legal framework is really important for in the case of privacy. And of course, we should also have secure frameworks. Technically, we could use blockchain in this matter. We could use various cloud infrastructures which provide a lot of flexibility for privacy. So once we have the policies, that is.
Thank you so much. Also, when I relate to this, I also really want to talk about these new technologies that are emerging. As someone who's working in this field as well, I'd like to ask this to Princi ji, if there is any such new emerging technology that you think would be like the next thing, or like, is there anything that you are like, currently busy in, like exploring or stuff that you would want the audience to know?
Yes, okay. So talking about, since we're in the topic of privacy, so we have created a bookmarking application. It's a privacy-focused bookmarking application, and it's based on block stack authentication, which is based on blockchain technology. So basically, it does not read your data. And so that's safer. It cannot like actually. So if you use Trove, I'm so in kind of sort of promoting the product itself. So there is no way we store your data on what you're reading and what's going through your mind, because what you read is so personal to us. So yeah, that was the whole purpose of creating the bookmark. So that is something we are exploring in the blockchain space, using block stack authentication of not storing any data and creating a bookmark application so that people find a safe space to read. So maybe, yeah, this is something that could be interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for the information as well. Also, Ms. Rumi, have you also been trying out any such new thing, or are you invested in something, some new solutions on your way?
Princi just mentioned blockchain. So we've been promoting blockchain technology as well, and it addresses privacy with decentralized privacy and with immutability, and so all of the big words. So with blockchain, I think, as I just mentioned, I think we're working on a aid distribution management platform called Rahat, and it uses mobile-based tokens. So we're, the aid agency can issue tokens to certain recipients, and say if there's, let's say, an aid of $100,000, and there is a natural disaster or something, there's a flooding, and we want to reach to the recipients faster and efficiently, dealing with all the infrastructure issues that could arise. So through that, the Rahat makes it really, really efficient, because you're transferring tokens from the aid agency directly to the recipients. And we actually just did a pilot in Chitwan in a Japan community a couple of last month. And what we did was we mobilized the local shopkeepers. So it was sort of really focused on creating a financial, like really focusing on the local economy. So where we distributed like a $1,500 to 110 people, and then instead of taking the commodities, we transferred tokens to the beneficiaries, to the recipients. The recipients can go to the shopkeepers and say, I've got 1,000 tokens, and I've been assigned for these 1,000 tokens, I could get 2 bags of rice, 2 bottles of oil, and they just would go to the shopkeepers and just buy. So there was this thought of, you're really creating financial resilience, where they're not like just getting relief, but they're going in and spending their tokens. So just creating that process. And with blockchain, there's an end-to-end transparency, so which basically means the aid agency can track everything, like all the transactions, real time, like how many tokens have gone, who's gone in and redeem their tokens. And so it's a very exciting platform that we are really trying to see that we could push forward.
Thank you so much. Also, like connecting to this, I'd like to ask this to Ms. Bonny as well. Like, as you talked about your research that you did on like using data to ensure that women have safe rides or safe travel in Nepal. So could you also like walk us through your process of your research, and what was this actually aimed at?
Right. So focusing on my research, it was close to my heart because I had touched on the issue of women. And it was also something that I think we all have faced on a daily basis at some point in our life where traveling is not safe, uh, given the different times of the day and different scenarios. Uh, for my research, I did a survey with people in Kathmandu, Nepal, female travelers of around 400 women from different sample groups like students, working women, elderly. And then I also touched on a lot of expert interviews with academicians and the practitioners in this field. So, what I was trying to get at is to focus on a niche market of women and identify what are the strategies that are necessary to create a safe ride hailing experience for them. And having said this, the if I have to touch on privacy in that part, the ethical consent that is so necessary in when you're researching on something related to health, that medical students are not even allowed to start their research without ethical consent. This is not there for any other field, but I think that is one important aspect that should always be taken into account while you're researching. And apart from that, what I realized is that uh, the market, women market in Nepal is comparatively more mobilized than the ones in our neighboring countries, like even India or Bangladesh. When I say this, I mean that women have more opportunities to work and get educated, in contrast to the popular belief that we are actually backwards since we are a developing country. But I found that women of all age groups are at least allowed to travel for work or for studies, but they do face problems which might limit their access at different times of the day. So, this was a very important insight. And when I went towards creating features for the app to make it safer, um, like I said, there should be an emergency button. If they press the emergency button, maybe the traffic police would be notified. But then the problem was that we do not have policies or regulations in place that authorizes the traffic police to look into an area or a specific vehicle number just because some app says that there could be danger. So, in the end, it all boils down to the legal framework and infrastructure, the coordination between the government bodies, the private sector, if they are providing the service, is really important to actually make sure that any gender group or any marginalized group or anyone in particular has a safe experience while traveling. So I think that is what we are lacking in every sector. Same with the data privacy that we just talked about.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences. I think again it's quite diverse, and I think the audience would also be is also quite, you know, they're quite they enjoyed this discussion very well. So before we move on to audience questions, if we have any, I'd also like to ask if there's anything our panelists would want to say to anyone who's like planning to start out in this field of data and tech. Any suggestions that you would want to give, or anything that you think would be really helpful for them? I'd like to start with Ms. Princi.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Narisha. I recently read a survey which from CNET, which said that 60% of people globally, and this was done in 28 markets globally, different markets, among 34,000 respondents. And so it said that 60% of people feel that technology is moving too fast. And a part of the problem that they feel is, the part of concern is, at the scale, at the speed of which the technology is moving, regulations, policies governing it is not, and they're concerned about their privacy and so much more. So I feel like there needs to be more people, especially women, addressing these kind of issues. from data gaps to policies to regulations of responsible tech, AI. So I just want to request more women to pursue a career in tech and data from this social science perspective, because I feel more innovation, more concerns are around there than because technology is moving too ahead already. So that's probably my request or message. Thank you.
Thank you, Princi. I'd like to pass the same question to Ms. Rumi. If there's anything that you would want to say to people who want to start out in this field.
I'd say don't wait. Just just get your feet wet. Just start somewhere. I think I had heard one of the panelists in the other panel say that she had a completely different background and she started data. And I mean, I did journalism and communications, and I'm back in like the tech world and data to some extent. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and even if you look at it from a market value, there's, as Princi just said, there's so many new technologies coming up. You know, blockchain is hot. You know, we're starting in my office. You know, we've been looking at blockchain really closely, and I've had a struggle with my team where I actually asked the tech elite to say, please hire women. Like my criteria was you have to hire women. And I think there were like 7 or 8 positions. He hired 1 woman, and I was just ecstatic. I mean, I was very excited that at least 1 was hired, but still like that's not much. That's not many at all. And I'd also like to say what Bonny had said earlier on, you know, we need role models. We definitely need role models. You know, I read women, empowering women stories to my son, so he doesn't think that, you know, it's like there aren't empowering women or there aren't women in tech, or, you know, just beyond tech as well, right? So because we hear all of these like male dominated stories, and we've got like there's a lot of male dominance in like high power positions. So I really try to expose him to these stories. I mean, I've got my daughter as well, like she's seeing it, she's learning it, but I'm also focusing on my son as well, so he can look up to women as role models. So I mean, there's a high need of role models, so please join in, you know, try it out. I think it's definitely worth it.
Thank you so much, Rumiji. And last but not the least, I'd like to ask this to Bonny ji as well.
All right, so I would like to start with the importance and the impact that data analytics could have in the field of development, since I've seen it so much in corporate field. And I think I'm repeating this point, but maybe it's worth it. I think the real impact will be in the field of development, and we really need to start it. It is definitely going to be from the process of data collection, but if all decisions, our policies, plans are driven based on data, be it in a private organization or at the national level, I think it can really make a difference. And the next point that I would like to make is anybody can join the field of data irrespective of your gender, of your caste, of your background even. And for this, just believe in yourself. If I can do it, you can do it too. Um, the next thing when you decide to dive into the field of data is acknowledge that you might not know everything. And there will be times when you will not know everything, but you will know something, and that will help you. So once you acknowledge, there are hundreds of ways to gain knowledge on that and to actually unlearn, relearn, and learn. So everybody can do it if you have that in mind. Trust me when I say it's not that complicated. The third point that I would like to make is, in order to include everyone in the field of IT and also in other fields so that the power of IT and data is leveraged, I think we should really have peer accountability. In my opinion, having a safe space for everyone to learn and grow and work really makes a difference to the growth of a person. If you do not feel outcasted, if you feel welcome, then you can grow, in my opinion. So let's not be judgmental. Let's just look at everyone as an individual. And I think we can get there. Slow and
Thank you.
steady.
Thank you so much for the advice. I think our audience also loved this discussion. I think we're done with the questions for the panel, and now we'll be taking some questions if we have from our audience. And I checked, we do have one question as for now. So I think also because we talked a lot about blockchain and blockchain technology as a whole, I think we have a question from Aisha Shasha. So she asks, what can be the way we use technology like blockchain in Nepal, especially when crypto is illegal? So anyone, any of our panelists would want to answer this question?
I can say something very quickly. I mean, it's unfortunate that crypto is illegal in Nepal. We just had a session, I think, a week ago about crypto regulations, and blockchain is not illegal. So the technology is more than just crypto. I mean, crypto uses blockchain, so that's what got it really popular. But there's a lot more to blockchain technology, and I mean, we can definitely talk at length about this. But I'd really encourage Aisha to maybe like follow eSatya is one of my initiatives, and it's a blockchain grassroots effort that started a couple of, I think, 3 years ago. So I would ask you to just follow that or reach out to me separately if you want to talk about blockchain. And you've heard of two applications that both Princi and I are working on separately, which I think doesn't deal with crypto, but even with with Rahat, like I have tokens. So it's something that's used within the economy of Nepal. Like nothing's going out of Nepal, so it doesn't become illegal. But as I said, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to chat through that separately.
Thank you so much, Rumiji. Princi, do you have anything to add on to this, or we could also move on to the next question?
I think Rumi covered that really well. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have one more question. So what would be the key actions we can take right now to make IT more inclusive and to bring more females to this ecosystem? So if anyone of our panelists would want to add on to this.
All right, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
So to make IT more inclusive, this was also covered a bit in the previous panel discussion before us. Um, the message that it's not that complicated and it's doable should be passed on to everyone from the very beginning. Um, Apart from workshops that are being organized, and it's a positive way forward, inclusion at the school level is also necessary. I think it's there in the curriculum right now, but computers could also be an optional subject for every field. uh, People can start learning from really early on. I've seen children aged 3 or 4 play programming games, and I think that really instills the concept of programming and breaking down complex things, computational thinking in children. And at the end of the day, these are the basics that will take you forward in the field of IT. So if it's really inculcated early on in the form of games or small activities in school and outside, um, in my opinion, people of any gender would be more inclined towards joining these fields. And also games. Uh, in Nepal, even me myself, I don't play computer games, but it's so popular among the men in workplace, in colleges, everywhere. So if we can get women to play games, maybe different sorts of games on the computer, I think that comfort level can be developed from the very beginning.
I just wanted to add something to that, Bonnie, because I'm seeing this real hand in my life right now. Because my son, who's 9, is a Minecraft fanatic. So he's just on Minecraft, and he's doing Scratch on the side, and he's really into it. My daughter, on the other hand, is younger, so I think she still has a long way to go. She's fairly young, but then we started to really see the discrepancy where my daughter is not interested in Minecraft. So we started like, okay, if you want to use your iPad, you need to have your 30 minutes of Minecraft. So we were sort of like trying to get that, as you said, games and I don't know, maybe like it's something that we need to just create that environment. And because of the way society is structured, where they've got like this, okay, female kids are going to be exposed to this, and it's like really, I feel like it's not that you are born with it, but that's how the society has really set it up, and it's really difficult to like detach them. So you have to put in an extra effort to get women into IT, because we've been deprived from years and years, and it's just something, to bring in that equality, you just need to give a push. So I completely agree with Bonny about starting it young, making a conscious effort, and I think that will make a big difference.
Sure, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so I would add something to that as well. I think, yeah, historically we've seen a majority of men in the field of technology and IT, and I think the ratio is still going to be tentatively the same, because change is a slow process, right? It's going to happen, but it's a slow process. So I feel there needs to be some kind of, I don't know how, but awareness among the majority of men pursuing STEM, that they need to be more welcoming to different genders who want to pursue a career in this field. And maybe, like Rumi said, we could start it young, like how she's been, how she wonderfully shared about her son and her relationship, and sharing empowered stories of women. So maybe starting young could be one, but I don't know. I think because personally speaking, I did not feel a lot of welcomed during my engineering days, and which is why I had a lot of issue coping up for the first 2 years of my engineering school. So I feel so if we could do something around those lines, it also would be great to bring in inclusion. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I've had a lovely talk. I hope the audience has had a very insightful session as well. If there are any questions, please feel free to keep it down in the chat box. We'll be trying to answer all of them. I think, yes. So I think we can end this session right here. So this was the final panel discussion for today, and we hope you've all been a part of a very insightful conversation, just like I have. And we hope we were able to provide the cherry on top to the Women in Virtual Data Conference 2021. So once again, I'd like to thank all my panelists for taking out your time for this insightful discussion. I've learned a lot personally, and I hope it was a good experience for you as well. So yeah, I'd like to pass it on to someone from the D4D team to continue with the sessions. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you, Nirisha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nirisha.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it was indeed a really interesting discussion, I would say. So yeah, thank you to WLiT team and the panelists for these insightful discussions. Thank you for sharing your experience, and not just that, but for repeatedly highlighting the importance of data in our everyday lives. And we in D4D, like we too echo the similar thoughts on importance of data. So yeah, it was a really interesting discussion.